18 years of 70-hour weeks at a Houston law firm. Never took a single sick day, not even when I had pneumonia back in 2019. Then on the morning I was set to close the biggest deal of my career, I got fired by someone who'd never passed the bar exam just because his last name matched the one on the building. What he didn't know was that I was the only reason 35 major clients stayed, and he just flipped the switch on his own destruction. My name is Scott Williams, and at 49, I'd built my entire identity around being the most reliable contract lawyer at Blackfield Legal. That Monday morning started like any other. Coffee at 6:30, desk by 7, reviewing the Pinnacle Industries acquisition documents for what had to be the 25th time. $15 million. Not our biggest deal, but significant enough that I'd personally shepherded it through 4 months of negotiations. The thing about military service is it teaches you discipline. I'd spent 8 years as a JAG officer before joining Blackfield, another 18 years building something I thought would last until retirement. My twin daughters were finishing their senior year at UT, $40,000 each in tuition. Susan's lupus medication ran $3,000 a month, even with insurance. The mortgage on our house in West University had 12 years left. At 49, you don't just start over. You can't afford to. The email notification popped up at 9:47, not from my direct supervisor Danny, who was in depositions all week, but from Jordan Blackfield. Please come to my office immediately. Jordan, 27 years old, Harvard MBA, son of our founding partner Charles Blackfield. He'd been installed as executive director 8 weeks ago after what the firm newsletter called an extensive national search. The search that somehow missed every qualified candidate and landed on the boss's kid who'd spent the last 3 years consulting at daddy's firm. I saved my work, straightened my tie, the blue one Susan had bought me for our 20th anniversary, and walked the long hallway to the corner office that used to belong to a partner with 30 years' experience. Jordan had redecorated since taking over. Gone were the law books and framed degrees, replaced by motivational posters about disruption and thinking outside the box. There was even a putting green in the corner. He didn't look up when I knocked, just pointed at the chair across from his desk. Sit. The chair was deliberately low, a power play I'd seen in bad movies. Jordan was scrolling through his phone, designer sneakers propped on the mahogany desk his grandfather had imported from Italy back when Blackfield Legal actually meant something. The same desk where Charles Blackfield Sr. had built relationships with Houston's oil barons, where Charles Jr. had expanded into corporate law, where I'd assumed Charles III would continue the tradition. Instead, here was Jordan, treating the family legacy like his personal playground. Scott, he finally acknowledged me, setting down his phone like it pained him. We need to discuss your future here. Is there an issue with the Pinnacle acquisition? I asked. I can walk you through the final terms. Amy Rodriguez specifically requested that I handle. It's not about any specific deal. He leaned back, fingers steepled in what I guessed was supposed to look authoritative. It's about cultural fit, dynamic synergy, the direction we're taking the firm. Cultural fit. I'd billed more hours than any other non-partner for 5 consecutive years. My client retention rate was 97%. I'd brought in $45 million in business over the past 3 years alone. But sure, let's talk about synergy. I'm not following. Look, you're competent. No one's saying you're not competent. The way he said competent made it sound like an insult. But Blackfield Legal is evolving. We need team players who understand innovation, disruption, people who think outside the box. I bit back the urge to mention that law firms succeeded by thinking inside very specific statutory and regulatory boxes. That's literally what clients paid us for. Expertise in navigating those boxes. You don't disrupt contract law. You master it. What exactly are you saying, Jordan? Today is your last day. Security will escort you out after you sign this. He slid a packet across the desk. I recognized the format. Non-disclosure agreement, non-compete clause, 3-month severance if I went quietly. 3 months. With Susan's medical bills and the girls' tuition, I'd be bankrupt by Christmas. You're firing me the week before Pinnacle closes? Amy Rodriguez has been working with me personally for 4 months. She specifically, Tiffany will handle the transition. He checked his phone again, already bored with ruining my life. Tiffany, his girlfriend. The paralegal who'd started 6 weeks ago and still couldn't format a memo properly. I'd caught her using ChatGPT to write client correspondence last week. When I'd mentioned it to Danny, he'd just shrugged and said, "Boss's orders. Don't make waves. Tiffany doesn't have a law license. She legally cannot. That's no longer your concern." His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "You have 1 hour to clear out your office. And Scott, the NDA is non-negotiable. You discuss any client matters, any proprietary information, and will bury you in litigation. The firm has very deep pockets. I stood slowly, keeping my face neutral. In the Army, they teach you to maintain composure under fire. This felt like incoming artillery, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. 18 years. 18 years of skipped vacations, of working through Susan's bad days when the lupus flared up, of missing the girls' soccer games and school plays. 18 years of building relationships with 35 corporate clients who trusted me with their million-dollar problems. 18 years of creating systems, templates, and processes that this firm ran on. My name wasn't on a single public document, but my fingerprints were on every major deal that walked through these doors. 1 hour, Jordan repeated, already typing on his phone. Leave your keycard with security. I walked back to my office in a daze. Through the glass walls, I could see my colleagues avoiding eye contact. Word traveled fast in law firms, and apparently being summoned to Jordan's office meant only one thing. I was radioactive now. Danny caught my eye from his office and mouthed, "What happened?" I just shook my head and kept walking. 1 hour to pack up 18 years. I pulled out my personal laptop, the one I'd used for late-night work when the firm's ancient servers crashed, my personal phone, where I kept the direct numbers of CEOs who needed weekend assistance, my handwritten notes from hundreds of client meetings, my reference books including the Texas Business Organizations Code with my margin notes from 2 decades of practice. Most importantly, I grabbed my coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Lawyer," a gift from the twins when they were 12. Sarah had wrapped it herself, and Emma had drawn a little heart on the card. They'd been so proud giving it to their dad, the lawyer who helped big companies with important stuff. What they couldn't pack into a banker's box was the relationships I'd built. The trust earned through countless 2 a.m. crisis calls. The personal cell numbers saved in my phone. The knowledge that Amy Rodriguez at Pinnacle Industries sent me Christmas cards with photos of her grandkids. That Brian Martinez at Apex Corp always scheduled meetings around his son's baseball games because I'd mentioned I understood family priorities. As security watched me fill that pathetic cardboard box, I thought about Pinnacle Industries. Amy had specifically requested me after I'd saved them from a catastrophic merger 3 years ago. She'd invited Susan and me to their annual charity gala, introduced us to her husband as the lawyer who saved our company. She had no idea that tomorrow, her $15 million acquisition would be handled by someone who thought whereas was spelled whereas. I signed Jordan's papers without reading them. 3-month severance, 18-month non-compete, standard NDA threatening financial ruin if I so much as breathed a word about client matters. Then I took my box and handed over my keycard to the security guard who'd greeted me by name for 18 years. "Sorry to see you go, Mr. Williams," he said quietly. "This place won't be the same." As I walked out of Blackfield Legal for what I thought was the last time, past the marble lobby and the commissioned portraits of 3 generations of Blackfields, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what they'd forgotten I still had. I sat in my home office at 2:15 p.m., still wearing my suit, staring at that banker's box like it might explain what had just happened. The house was quiet. Susan was at her rheumatologist appointment, discussing whether to switch to a more expensive biologic that might help her joint pain. The girls were at UT, probably cramming for finals, completely unaware that their dad had just become a middle-aged unemployment statistic. I should have been in the Pinnacle meeting right now, walking Amy through the final acquisition terms, explaining the regulatory compliance requirements that I'd spent weeks researching. Instead, I was unemployed at 49 with $6,700 in monthly fixed expenses and exactly 3 months of severance to figure out my next move. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something sharper. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that, but military-trained analysis. In the Army, when your position got overrun, you didn't sit there feeling sorry for yourself. You regrouped, took inventory of your assets, and planned your counterattack. I opened my laptop and started cataloging what I actually owned versus what Blackfield Legal thought they controlled. First, the intellectual property. Over 18 years, I developed a comprehensive system of contract templates, due diligence checklists, and negotiation frameworks. Not the basic stuff any lawyer could draft, but sophisticated tools refined through hundreds of deals. The firm had never asked me to transfer these to their servers, probably because nobody there understood their value. They lived in my personal cloud storage, meticulously organized, legally mine. Second, the relationships. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the contacts. Amy Rodriguez from Pinnacle Industries, Brian Martinez at Apex Corp, Karen Mitchell from Traverse Industries. 35 CEOs, CFOs, and general counsels who had my personal number because Blackfield's official channels meant waiting days for a callback. These weren't just business cards from networking events. Amy texted me photos of her grandkids playing Little League. Brian asked for restaurant recommendations when clients visited Houston. Karen had called me personally when her company faced that SEC investigation 2 years ago. Not because she had to, but because she trusted me to handle it quietly. Third, the knowledge that couldn't be digitized or transferred. I opened a spreadsheet and started documenting every active deal, every client preference, every institutional quirk that made these relationships work. Johnson Tech insisted on blue ink signatures. Their CEO was superstitious about black ink after a deal went bad in the 90s. Sterling Corp scheduled all meetings before 10 a.m. because their London-based board participated by video conference. Pinnacle Industries had a hidden arbitration clause problem in their vendor agreements that I'd discovered and quietly fixed in 23 different contracts over 3 years. Details that weren't in any client file. Context that couldn't be explained in a transition memo to someone whose legal experience consisted of 6 weeks of paralegal work. My phone buzzed. Text from Danny. Emergency meeting called. Jordan announced Tiffany is taking over all your active files. Partners are asking questions he can't answer. This is going to be a disaster. I didn't respond. The NDA was vague about personal communications, and I wasn't taking any chances. But Danny's message confirmed what I'd suspected. Panic was already setting in at Blackfield Legal. The non-compete clause Jordan had shoved in front of me was 18 months, but I knew Texas law. Non-competes were notoriously hard to enforce, especially when termination was without cause and handled in bad faith. Being fired to make room for the boss's unqualified girlfriend might just qualify as bad faith. By 4:30 p.m., I'd transformed my dining room into a war room. 18 years of accumulated knowledge spread across Susan's antique oak table that we'd bought when we first moved to Houston. Not client files, those belonged to Blackfield, but my personal notes, my systems, my frameworks. The infrastructure I'd built that had made me indispensable, or so I'd thought. I created a new email address, swilliams.consulting, not a competing firm. That would violate the non-compete, just a professional presence. I updated my LinkedIn to independent legal consultant, carefully avoiding any mention of Blackfield Legal, completely within my rights. Then I waited. The first text came at 5:43 p.m. Amy Rodriguez. Scott, the new lawyer just asked me what force majeure means. Please tell me this is a joke. I stared at the message for a full minute. Technically, responding about the Pinnacle acquisition would violate the NDA, but expressing sympathy for a friend's frustration, that was different. I'm no longer with Blackfield Legal as of today. I hope your deal proceeds smoothly. Her response was immediate. What? Call me. Now. I'm bound by certain agreements. I can't discuss specifics. Can you discuss anything? Over coffee? As friends? I smiled for the first time all day. As friends, always. Within 2 hours, I'd received similar messages from 8 other clients. Word traveled fast in Houston's corporate circles, especially when it involved Blackfield Legal's most trusted attorney suddenly disappearing. Each carefully worded response made it clear. I was gone, I was restricted, but I still existed. Jordan Blackfield thought he'd surgically removed a replaceable part from his machine. What he didn't understand, what 3 generations of Blackfield lawyers had never really grasped, was that modern legal practice wasn't about the firm's name on the letterhead. It was about the 3 a.m. phone calls when a deal was falling apart. The weekend emergencies when regulatory deadlines loomed. The trusted voice on the other end of the line who actually knew what force majeure meant and could explain it without consulting Google. They had the building, the letterhead, the marble lobby with those imposing portraits. I had everything else. 3 days later, I sat across from Gary Thompson in a conference room that smelled like leather and old money. Thompson and Associates occupied 2 floors of a building 4 blocks from Blackfield Legal, close enough to share the same lunch spots, far enough to maintain professional distance. Scott Williams. Gary leaned back in his chair, studying me over reading glasses that had seen 35 years of Houston legal practice. I've been wondering when you'd finally leave that circus. Gary was old-school Houston legal establishment. He'd built his firm from nothing back when handshake deals still mattered, when lawyers focused on solving problems instead of generating billable hours. Thompson and Associates had 25 lawyers to Blackfield's 120, but they'd survived and thrived by being smart, not just big. I'm exploring my options, I said carefully. Consulting. Perhaps independent work. Independent work. He smiled knowingly. With your client relationships. I maintain personal friendships with many Houston executives. Those friendships persist regardless of my employment status. Gary understood exactly what I wasn't saying. In his generation, business was still personal. Relationships mattered more than marketing budgets or LinkedIn connections. Hypothetically, he said, pouring himself water from a crystal pitcher that probably cost more than most lawyers' monthly salary if Thompson and Associates were to bring on an independent consultant, not an employee, mind you, someone with extensive contract experience and established relationships. How might that work? Hypothetically, such an arrangement would need to respect existing agreements. No direct solicitation, no sharing of proprietary information. But if clients independently sought out that consultant, they'd need representation. They'd need options. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two professionals who understood how the game was really played. Jordan Blackfield called me yesterday, Gary said finally. Warned me about a former employee who might try to violate his non-compete. Suggested any firm that helped you would face litigation. My stomach tightened, but Gary's expression remained calm. I told him Thompson and Associates doesn't respond well to threats, especially empty ones from children playing dress-up in their daddy's suits. For the first time in 3 days, I felt something like hope. Here's what I propose, Gary continued. Thompson and Associates brings you on as an independent consultant, not an employee, which keeps you clear of the non-compete. You work your own matters, build your own practice. We provide infrastructure, malpractice coverage, and most importantly, legal protection when Blackfield decides to get nasty. What's your cut? 35% of billings. High, I know, but it includes full litigation support if they come after you, and they will. 35% was steep. At Blackfield, I'd kept nothing beyond my salary and year-end bonus, but 35% of something beat 100% of nothing, especially with Susan's medical bills and college tuition looming. I need to think about it, of course. But Scott, don't think too long. Jordan Blackfield is young, stupid, and scared. That combination makes people dangerous. I left Thompson and Associates at 4:30 p.m. with Gary's offer in writing. As I waited for the elevator, my phone exploded with notifications. Amy Rodriguez. Deal fell through. New lawyer missed critical SEC deadline. Board meeting called for tomorrow. This is a disaster. Brian Martinez. Scott, can we talk? Urgent issue with our compliance filing. Karen Mitchell. Please tell me you're still practicing law somewhere. Danny. Tiffany just asked if contracts need to be notarized. I'm hiding in my office. And most surprisingly, a message from an unknown Houston number. Mr. Williams, I'm general counsel at Summit Industries. Amy Rodriguez suggested I reach out. Are you taking new clients? Summit Industries, $12 billion in revenue. Never a Blackfield client. I sat in my car in the parking garage, engine off, staring at those messages. The smart play was to wait. Let the non-compete period expire. Start fresh in 18 months. The safe play. But I kept thinking about Amy's message. Deal fell through. A $15 million acquisition I'd spent 4 months perfecting, destroyed in 3 days by someone who couldn't spell force majeure correctly. I called Gary Thompson from that parking garage. That was fast, he answered. I accept. With conditions. I won't solicit any Blackfield clients directly, but if they come to me, I'll represent them. If Blackfield wants a fight, they better bring more than daddy's money and empty threats. Welcome to Thompson and Associates, counselor. Can you start Monday? I can start now. I have 6 friends who need legal advice and 1 potential new client who's never worked with Blackfield. Gary laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from 35 years of watching young hotshots crash and burn. Come back tomorrow. We'll get you set up. And Scott, document everything. Every text, every call, every contact who reaches out. We're going to need it. I hung up and composed a simple LinkedIn update. Pleased to announce I'm now consulting with Thompson and Associates. Looking forward to new challenges and continued relationships. Professional, vague, completely within my rights. Within an hour, I had 47 reactions and 19 private messages. Word spread through Houston's legal community like wildfire, especially when it involved Blackfield Legal's star attorney suddenly resurfacing at a competitor. My phone rang at 8:15 p.m. Amy Rodriguez, Scott, thank God. Her voice was strained. I know you can't talk about Blackfield business. I'm not calling about that. I'm calling because Summit Industries needs contract help, and I told them you're the best attorney in Houston. That's just friendly advice between friends, right? Just friendly advice, I agreed. Good. Because, as a friend, I might mention your name to a few other executives who've been complaining about their current representation. Purely personal recommendations, of course. We both knew exactly what she was saying. Amy had built her own network over 20 years as a CEO. When she recommended someone, people listened. I appreciate your friendship, Amy. Likewise. Oh, and Scott? Jordan Blackfield is an incompetent idiot. That's not business talk. That's just one friend telling another friend the truth. The exodus happened faster than anyone could have predicted. Within 2 weeks, 16 companies had officially terminated their relationships with Blackfield Legal. Not because I'd solicited them. I'd been meticulous about documenting every interaction. But because Jordan's modernization was collapsing under its own weight. The breaking point came when Tiffany missed a critical SEC filing deadline for a public company merger. $50 million in potential penalties. The client didn't just fire Blackfield, they sued for malpractice and demanded the Texas bar investigate Tiffany's unauthorized practice of law. Danny kept me updated through carefully worded texts. Emergency partners meeting. 3 senior associates quit today. Then, Charles Sr. flew back from Europe. Jordan locked in his office. Finally, firm-wide meeting canceled. Rumors about bankruptcy consultant coming in. By the end of month 1, I was handling 21 corporate accounts through Thompson and Associates. Gary had given me 2 associates, a paralegal, and my own floor. The firm's monthly revenue had tripled. Charles Blackfield Sr. called me personally on a Thursday afternoon in November. Scott. His voice carried the weight of 40 years building something his son had destroyed in months. Name your terms. Full partnership, your own division, equity stake, whatever you want. It's too late for that, Charles. It's never too late. I built this firm from nothing. I won't watch it die. You should have thought about that before you retired and left it to someone who thinks law is about disruption instead of expertise. There was a long pause. What would it take? Just, what would it take to make this stop? Nothing. Your clients are making their own choices based on the representation they're receiving. That's how the market works. This is coordinated. This is revenge. This is consequences, I said, and hung up. 6 weeks after I was fired, the partners voted Jordan out. Tiffany was gone the next day. Apparently, the Texas bar had some strong opinions about paralegals practicing law without supervision. Last I heard, Jordan was working at his uncle's Toyota dealership in Katy. Tiffany went back to school. But the damage was done. Without their major clients, Blackfield Legal couldn't make payroll. The malpractice suits were piling up. Commercial lenders were calling in loans. 3 generations of family legacy reduced to bankruptcy proceedings and angry creditors. 18 months after that humiliating morning in Jordan's office, I made full partner at Thompson and Associates. We'd grown from 25 to 67 lawyers, mostly handling the corporate clients who'd followed me from Blackfield. The twins graduated debt-free with job offers from major Houston companies. Susan's new rheumatologist, paid for by our firm's premium insurance plan, had her lupus symptoms better controlled than they'd been in years. We'd refinanced the house at a lower rate and were actually ahead on the mortgage. Thompson & Associates now bills $18 million annually. I have my own building downtown with a view that doesn't include the empty Blackfield Tower. That building sold last month to a tech startup that's converting it to loft apartments. Last month, I was invited to speak at the Houston Bar Association's annual conference about building client relationships in the digital age. The room was packed. 300 lawyers hanging on every word about the fundamentals they'd forgotten while chasing the latest legal technology trends. Amy Rodriguez introduced me as the lawyer who taught us that trust beats algorithms every time. During the Q&A, a young associate asked how I'd built such strong client loyalty. I told him what my old drill sergeant used to say: show up, shut up, and do the work better than anyone expects. The room erupted in applause. Apparently that message still resonates in a profession drowning in buzzwords and billable hour pressure. 2 weeks ago, Charles Blackfield Sr. showed up at my office unannounced. Security called to ask if I wanted to see him. I said yes. Military courtesy dies hard, even for former enemies. He looked older than his 72 years, carrying the weight of watching 40 years of work disappear in months. We sat in my conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city we'd both served as lawyers for decades. I owe you an apology, Scott, he said finally. Not for the termination. That was Jordan's stupidity. For not seeing what you'd built, what you meant to those clients. For letting my retirement blind me to what was happening. I poured him coffee from the same crystal service Gary Thompson had used during our first meeting. You built something worth protecting, Charles. Your son just forgot why it mattered. The irony, he smiled sadly, is that the day before Jordan fired you, I called from Italy to tell him to promote you to junior partner. Said you were the future of the firm. That hit harder than I expected. Junior partner would have changed everything: equity, security, legacy. But I kept my expression neutral. What did he say? That you were too rigid, too focused on details. That the firm needed fresh perspectives. Charles laughed bitterly. Fresh perspectives, from someone who couldn't spell whereas correctly. We sat in comfortable silence, two professionals who understood what we'd both lost and gained. Every morning when I review our client list, 35 companies that trust Thompson & Associates with their most important legal matters, I'm reminded that competence isn't just about knowing the law. It's about understanding that clients don't hire firms. They hire people. And when you break faith with the people who've given you 18 years of their lives, who've built your success on nights and weekends while their families waited at home, you don't just lose an employee. You lose everything they built for you. Jordan Blackfield wanted innovation and disruption. He got it, just not the way he'd planned. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being competent when everyone expects you to fail. And sometimes, when you're very lucky, you get to watch incompetence destroy itself while you build something better from the ashes.